Welcome back to Movies, Films, and Motion Pictures. I'm your host, Ewan Graf, and today we are taking a look at 3 different Freaky Friday movies. Isn't it lucky that this franchise fits perfectly into what I'm doing here with this show? Amazing, right? Now, if this is your first time, let me tell you what I mean by fitting in. Each week, I'm taking a look at a movie, something that has recently released, a film, something that is at least good, and it can be old or new, and finally, a motion picture, which has to be older than me, born 1998. Which brings me to the selection of today, the Freaky Friday movies. We'll go through this franchise backwards. Our movie today is Freakier Friday, that is currently out in theaters. Our film is Freaky Friday from 2003, and our motion picture is Freaky Friday from 1976. Did you know that there was an OG version starring Jodie Foster? I didn't. There's also like some TV shows, I think, and like some TV movie. We're not going to be talking about those. But let's start it off with our movie of the week, which is Freakier Friday from 2025. Just FYI, after I've gone over the initial premise and my brief thoughts on the film, I'll share my full-on spoiler thoughts. But these movies are incredibly formulaic, so even if you haven't seen any of them, your first guess as to how they'll play out is very likely to be on the ball anyways. But Freaky Friday is from Nisha Ganatra, who made Late Night with Emma Thompson and Mindy Kaling, and then The High Note with Dakota Johnson, Tracy Ellis Ross, and Calvin Harrison Jr. These are the other 2 films of hers that I've actually seen, and I think they're both quite, I'd say serviceable movies. And I think I'd say the same about Freakier Friday, which sees Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis reprise their roles 22 years later. With Lohan's Anna now a mother herself, we find ourselves at the possibility to make this Friday, like the title suggests, even freakier. Anna has been a single parent for her daughter Harper and is soon to get a stepdaughter from the perfect Manny Jacinto, who most people probably know from The Good Place. That's where I first saw him. There's lots of familiar faces that return, and we also get Chad Michael Murray. We get Mark Harmon, now retired and not on the call for any NCIS cases. But I'll talk about the original movie more when it's its turn, but the movie is pretty, typical slight step down of what you'd expect a sort of comedy sequel of this type to be. And it's also in very much referencing a lot of the tropes and scenes and moments from the original one with slight subversions, but I don't think it adds too much of the comedy or character dynamics on top of it to, obviously you don't need to justify why they made this. It's because it makes sense. She's old enough now to have her own kid. And that's the reason why this whole wheel keeps on turning, keeps on rolling. Money to be made here. I obviously don't fault Disney for that. I wish they had made a better movie out of it, but this just kind of feels like it fits into the mold of what they're going for. So if we have a look at the characters, the 2 daughter characters that come in, that, again, spoilers if you haven't seen it, get involved in the Freakier Friday, so it's not just, a ménage à deux, or à trois, it's à quatre. There's 4 people involved in this, where the stepdaughter, I'm forgetting her name, but she's the daughter of Jacinto. Actually, it just came to me again. It's Lily. I was debating about is it Lily or is it not, but and I checked. It's Lily, and the other daughter is called Harper. It's Tess with Jamie Lee Curtis and Anna, but I'll probably refer to them by their actor's name because I don't know how much of these characters are just not there to move the plot along. I don't feel like there's a lot of character progression, even though that's the whole point of Freakier Friday. It's coming to that sort of resolution of figuring out walking a mile on someone else's foot, which often in these movies involves driving a car recklessly. For some reason, that's just kind of a recurring thing that happens over and over again in these movies. It's oh, you can't kiss me, you're my dad. Or, should I get in this car? I don't even have a driver's license yet. I'm 15. So that's the sort of expectation you can have for this franchise, and I think it's going to be featured in pretty much all of them pretty consistently. It's actually admirable how consistent they stay true to their nature. That aside, I think the conflicts in any of these movies are very surface level and are in service of having moments play out where someone's out of their depth And oftentimes it illustrates like how are you a functioning family when you know nothing about like, just the interests of especially your child. And it always makes the mother look kind of out of there. And the conflict here is that like the inbound marriage to Eric, who is from London, and would mean that they would probably move back to London. His daughter had lost her mother. He lost his partner a while back. I don't remember how long ago that was, but sort of that lingering trauma that doesn't like connects her back to that city that she wants to go back to. I think that is like a very underexplored trope, and like the dead mom thing just kind of pops up to be a sort of trait of vulnerability for Lily. So it's something that like is easily, is something for Harper to be easily sympathetic towards, where I feel like these characters on another level don't really connect that much, apart from just seeing how perfect Manny, like Eric, is for Anna, for Lindsay Lohan as a partner, the way that he like fully loves her but always has his kids. Like all of these movies are very much family movies in that sense, in a derogatory way, where they oversimplify these family relationships down to it's all just about realizing that everything is good. So there's a lack of like actual conflict here, when the whole conflict is just the switcheroo itself, when it would be way more interesting to have a larger conflict within these characters. Obviously, this is an entertaining blockbuster summer movie for families, so it doesn't need to have like a sort of heaviness or sadness to itself. I'm not talking about that. But if it wants to make a plot line about Lindsay Lohan not making her own music, but working for a label and for or as a producer or agent or whatever a fucking role is with that Rizless charisma is not available for whoever played that, like the artist that she's like, the pop star that she represents. I don't know, something about that was just, that whole thing didn't work for me. And then it culminates to like, there's a song about like, oh god, the song is really horrible, that they perform about like the baby, I don't want to let you go, everything's so hard. It was like it's really like bad song, like comedically bad. So I don't know. I think it was to be heartfelt, and initially it plays like into the expectations that the two daughters then have, that maybe this would be a way to split them up, right? And then by the end it is revealed that no, the song wasn't about my Jake, Chad Michael Murray, and how I'm still into him, but about you, that I don't know, you are baby. No, it's not him who is baby. It's like, oh, it's like the Darth Vader moment from The Empire Strikes Back, but this time Freaky Friday, still weekdays, I guess. I don't know. Definitely not the weekend. I don't know, something about that just felt underwhelming. It was very laughable, and then the switcheroo of like, in the original, which I'm taking away some of these things for what I'll say about the 2003 Freaky Friday, but it's a lot of it. It's just paralleled, where there is the live performance to it, where initially there Jamie Lee Curtis as Lindsay Lohan's Anna had to play in the background, right, to kind of match the performance, because there was the gig and she didn't know the skills and the transferable thing of the mind and the skills and all of those hijinks, and they go like, you know what, no, we're not gonna do that, and pulls her up onto stage, as if that's like a sort of misdirect on maybe the expectations of playing out this thing the same way. I just like couldn't help but feel like this is such a weird performance for this like opening act of this artist who's like on stage, and I think like during the like, I don't know, it can't be like that far into, I don't remember if it's like one of the first songs, but just comes out on the stage as like, oh, yeah, this is this random person who probably none of you would know in the audience, and they're just gonna sing like 2 songs or something like that, yeah, just, I don't know, it was a bit out of nowhere. And again, it's like the trope that I don't like at all, that they do in I think all 3 of those movies. I'd have to check, but like the public speech moment, that feels like the realization has to come from a moment there. I don't know if in the original actually that is that, but we'll get to that once we get to that. But it's like, the sort of switching back into bodies, right? The first time it happens overnight. In the first one it doesn't. In the first one it's instantaneous. I'm just saying it at the same time. But here it's also, again, like the logic of these movies is like, you wish it, and then overnight at some inconspicuous time at night, probably at 2:17 in the morning. Real ones get that reference. You switch. Then when they switch back, it happens immediately. But yeah, I don't know. They have a bit more fun with it in the original one, but I'll talk on that in a minute. It's gonna take a while until we get to the motion picture. But yeah, this just feels like it hits all of the marks it's supposed to. It has like segmented those moments of the ridiculous nature of being in someone else's body by not really having, like, the cringe level is very much like turned up. Like you don't really have a great concern about how you're being perceived, because it's all in service of getting something across that you couldn't in your own body, which for the girls that is to like try and break them up in the way that they see fit. And I just thought that both grandma and mother with Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis's character at the start of this movie feel pretty homogenous. I don't think there's like a huge difference between them because they've both grown up, so it's more of the contrast of like generational humor and less on like characteristics. And I think that is supposed to be the strong suit, that you aren't just like part of the generation where like all about it, like the Jamie Lee Curtis stuff was all, I'm old. The young girl Lily in her body, and Jamie Lee Curtis was like, oh, I'm old, I'm wrinkled, I need to blow up my lips and have them all like pulpous and big. For Jamie Lee Curtis in the like teens body, it was like, oh, I can move and I can like bend down without farting. Isolated, that can be funny bits, but I don't think there was like much else to that. And then it just arrives at moments where the resolution is inbound, but not before you, in the third act, blow it up between these characters where they have like a fight. It's very much like just a screenplay 101 for a movie like this, which, again, it doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. It's a sequel to Freaky Friday, which is based on a movie or based on a children's book from like 1972, which was very much. We'll talk about that a bit more in motion picture because it's a bit more tied to the 76 version. But there's nothing like really imaginative here. It's not like there's something great here, and the lesson is just. I don't know what is the valuable lesson in these movies. It is basically just your lives are perfect. Why are you complaining? It's not even like family has your back or anything. It really is like, I don't know. It's just a bit of nothing. And to me, another peculiar thing was that for the acting wise, right, for the young ones, which I think. Like some of the actors who play the teenagers are actual teenagers. I think they're like 15 or 16. So there's like a limit to probably like life experience, like the acting thing. I wouldn't put it past them to be like super great into everything. And that's a common complaint if you know me from Quiet on Set. That's like something that I'm known for hating on kid actors or even teen actors. But it's not even that. I think they're fine. The thing is that like Lily is British and she's the only one with a British accent. And when she switches bodies with Jamie Lee Curtis with Tess, she keeps the British accent, and I think for a little moment they make a joke out of Jamie Lee trying to do a British accent, and it like backfires. It doesn't work at all. It sounds horrible. So it's like transferable that like your consciousness is also carrying your accent over your body, which thinking about it now, I guess it makes, no, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't go with your consciousness. It stays in your body, which to me was weird, right? Wouldn't the way that you speak not be intrinsically linked to like fully your body and more to your consciousness, to your mind? It would have been more pain to have a British, an English accent and then switch that character-wise, and then Jamie Lee Curtis would have had to do a horrible British one, which would have been maybe funny for me, but more as a train wreck, and not didn't work for the movie. So I don't know if that was, I don't know. I mean, they didn't have to write in a British character who switches bodies. That was all on them. So I don't know what was all about that. But I think resolving these like the lesson about empathy, resolving problems through that, it always feels a bit too neat for me. I did like the joke this time around that like they have the same Chinese old lady who did it in the first one, which felt a bit culturally insensitive, I gotta say, in the first. And then it's a misdirect. I don't know why they are at like the get together bachelor whatever thing for their current marriage. It's like the movie trope of only the characters that appeared in the one movie that audiences know are also relevant to the characters in the story, which is always like, it's a bit like, it's so much relying on bringing back actors who people are familiar with, because like, oh, I know that from another movie, I know the person, and doesn't help the case of like these characters feeling really hollow. If that's what you rely on, Happy Gilmore 2 is another like perfect example of like just back to back, like showing us the whole. It's not about Happy Gilmore, but a lot of issues in that movie. It ends up feeling just a bit like tad too neat always, in like how these problems resolve itself. That like there's no deeper underlying issue other than like circumstantial stuff. That ultimately, again, is just feels like there's a knot and you can untie it, and it's not certain things that like are just like deeper than that, if that makes sense. I think the moments that are still between Chad and Jamie Lee, still funny that he's like, because they switch bodies. In the first one, and she was talking Chad up. He's still kind of into her. It's also very cringy, but it is kind of a funny bit. All I gotta say about this film is that I can't wait for Freakier Friday, where they swap places with someone who has died and connect it back to the good place, where Manny Jacinto can reprise his role. That was my joke, and it's a bad one. So let's move on to our film of the week, which is Freaky Friday from 2003. Now, I've already talked, I think, a bunch in connection to, I guess, the prequel. No, of course not a prequel. They're going to do a prequel at one point that's going to be like Freak Friday, or like, I don't know, Good Thursday, or, I don't know, Thanksgiving. I don't know. But this one comes from Mark Webber, who made Mean Girls a year later after this, also with Lindsay Lohan. And since then, I gotta say, like, his recent couple of years have been pretty horrible. He's made the He's All That remake with Addison Rae for Netflix. He also has made like other cringeworthy attempts of like romance comedies, like Mother of the Bride last year or Magic Camp. I don't know. Just let's just move on from this this dreadful recent filmography of his. I think like some of these I've actually given like a half star to because they were that bad. But anyways, same characters as the last film, of course, minus the children. And I think this movie is where the sort of body swap premise works best. I think the initial setup is great. There's like differences in characters that were missing in the new one. The distinct like punk rock, like the music allegory. I think the other characters in Freakier Friday were kind of empty husks of just kind of the way that they dressed. So I think it was more the costumes wearing the characters than the other way around. So it was visually maybe easy to identify what they switched up, but not that they didn't have the characteristics. And that was definitely something that is not missing in this. I think the way that they have like, their own problems going on feels way more like an actual thing than in the new one. You got someone, who's got a concert at the end of the year, has like trouble in school with like a certain teacher who can't stand her, even though she's doing like, she has actual problems that need solving, that aren't beyond just like, putting them in body swap positions into like different scenarios where they're out of the depth, if that makes sense. And I think it also relies way more on like the crush thing that she has on Chad Michael Murray, like that sort of, romance is way more at the center of it all. I think Mark Harmon as like the teacher who just hates this family generationally, and like him reprising his role is, I think that was like pretty funny. Like that's sort of the cameo that I can like accept and think is actually like adding to this franchise in a way. But again, it's the pet peeve of mine, like the public speech moment, like. Why is that needed for the Switch? Why can't it be like a quieter resolution? I know it makes sense like cinematically to be in front of a stage and have this sort of realization in front of everyone, but I just don't think it's needed for something like this. Obviously, it has all of the bigger actiony moments where there's more stuff happening. So you want to escalate it to a point where it feels like it needs to be in front of an audience. But I don't know. It's just a pet peeve of mine. I don't like it. I think I misspoke. I said Mark Harmon. I meant Stephen Kobolowski, who's Mr. Bates. Mixed them up there. But I think, again, this movie is very neat. Like, it's the same thing of, like, the perfect fiance that she's about to, marry. They're both, like, really good at their stuff in life. So it's, like, the setup of, like, then failing and not being able to do as well as the other person, which is an interesting setup. But I think the body swapping shouldn't all be about, like, this sort of, like, the immeasurement of like how well someone else does it and how difficult like being in their shoes is to empathize with them. I think it should just come from a place of like understanding each other. Again, that doesn't make for a very entertaining movie, of course, but I think it is something that just feels very fake and a bit, again, I'd say like just a bit too neat. But then there's, I think, this like early 2000s sort of aesthetic that also is like similar in Mean Girls, like the sort of capturing of high school day to day, where that seems to be enough to like fill a bunch of the runtime of the film, which I think works in its favor. Like, and some of like the visual choices it makes for Jamie Lee, who switched bodies with her daughter at this point, like to cut her hair short and act differently and see how like the other perspective of someone else adds to their life through a youthful lens for something who's a bit more mature and looks at things in a different way. But when it then comes down to just like speaking very formally to people, when you obviously like, I don't know, you want to make that contrast clear. It's a comedy. Like it's an interesting bit, but it's like, I don't know, it runs dry really fast. It really quickly isn't that funny anymore. If like you need to set up a juicy like punchline to it all for being such a stickler and being so different. But definitely this is like less than what I'm about to talk about in motion pictures, where like the sort of skill set of the other is, especially on the teenagers part, is like so overblown and so crazy. This one is holding back a bit more, where it focuses a bit more on like the family dynamics of, I think it's really sweet how much Mark Harmon is like concerned about not fucking up the family and fitting in and getting her to like him. And I think that like sort of moment of realization that like, oh shit, I'm trying to break something up when they just have the best of, like, for me and my concern, like the moments of someone having a heart to heart, not knowing whose consciousness he's speaking to, they can be like overwritten and but they're also quite sweet. I think there's something like pretty sweet and cute about it. So I'm not going to hate on it too much. I forgot to give my rating for Freakier Friday. I'm gonna give that like a 5 out of 10. I think this Freakier Friday is a solid 7 out of 10. I think it's a really good movie, good serviceable comedy. Not like one of my favorites, but it is quite entertaining, quite fun. So let's move on to our motion picture of the week, which is Freaky Friday from 1976. This is sort of the first film in this Freaky Friday universe. Again, maybe it's finally time to properly say what it's based on. It's based on a children's book by Mary Roger that came out 4 years before. This film came out in 1972. I haven't read it, but from reading the sort of plot synopsis summary, I'd say that it has like a lot of issues with certain outdated premises and notions, and just like, that they don't really, I guess, cut out, but it definitely like changed in the Disney version. I actually don't know if the original, because I think it's also streaming on Disney, so I assume they also made it. Yeah, it was a Walt Disney production initially, but that one stars Jodie Foster and as like, I think pretty young as well. Like, she must be like a teenage in this as well. If I looked it up correctly, I think she was like 15 in this as well. But Jodie Foster started out as a really young actress in Taxi Driver, I guess, is her first role, but she also had a bunch of other stuff. Just checking her page right now, and this was the first one where she had a bit more of a lead role. And I think she's kind of the best thing about this film. She definitely can carry a lot of this film on her shoulders quite a bit. And then I'm less familiar with the rest of the cast. I see them in some iconic films, like, for example, Barbara Harris is in Nashville, Family Plot. Like, there's some films that are like more popular on Letterboxd than Freaky Friday that they were part in. John Ashton as part of like West Side Story, the Gremlins sequel, and Patsy Kelly, who was in Rosemary's Baby and The Gorilla as Kitty the maid. Okay. Again, I'm not as familiar with them. There's also Dick Van Patten, who was in Spaceballs, Robin Hood, Man in Tights, Westworld, and yeah, pretty much all of them have Freaky Friday as the sixth most popular film on Letterboxd, which is interesting, that sort of consistency, that they've made 5 films more popular than Freaky Friday. I think this movie is quite outdated. It's essentially, just reading from the synopsis, you can kind of hear like how old it is. Schoolgirl Annabelle is hassled by her mother, and Mrs. Andrews is annoyed with her daughter Annabelle. They both think that the other has an easy life. On a normal Friday morning, they both complain about each other and wish that they could have the easy life of their daughter/mother for just one day, and their wishes come true as a bit of magic puts Annabelle in Mrs. Andrews' body and vice versa. They both have a Freaky Friday. Like, this seems to be like it's a very, I don't know, it almost feels like a really shitty prompt that you put into ChatGPT and was like, okay, give me a premise. Actually wonder what that would do, but I'm not supporting destroying the planet, so I'm not using shitty AI. But the issue with this film at the core is that essentially the mom's life is like, being a housewife, that at one point, like, the dad wants to get a promotion, so he has like a meeting at the port, or like a get together at the end, which is supposed to secure him the position, so she has to cook for it and do all of this stuff. And then there's hijinks about essentially having like 10 people in her home that all need to do some sort of fixing job, and it becomes chaotic and all just too much. And it something about that read to me as kind of poking fun at this, like, I don't know, because it felt like a lot of the problems were just that it's a teenager and it didn't seem that difficult, and it kind of locked that person into like in a very over the top normal day of someone who's like has to deal with 7 people coming by. Maybe it was in the 70s a bit different, that you had to call over like people constantly, but I was just like, dude, the expenses on this, like, that guy gotta get the promotion just so they can pay for all of the people coming by. Again, maybe a totally different time that I can't relate to anymore, in the way that you, I guess, call services and people around and just people walk into your home all the time. But it was creepy, it was weird, it was pretty sexist. Obviously, it didn't age great, and I think the most of the issues that the mom then had all came from basically the daughter being very energetic, being good at sports, being like the MVP of the field hockey team, and them having like a playoff game, and her, like, everyone following her because she's the star player, and it all felt like just setups for this really rapidly escalating plot that like culminates in them being in a really over the top car chase that feels very disconnected from the somewhat obviously, grounded way that this story starts out, with these two characters who we don't get at all like enough time with to get the different personalities, apart from one of them being young and the other one being old. Again, some of the same like critiques that I have with the latest one is that apart from her being a housewife and her being good at and the daughter being good at sports, there's not much that like makes them different. And I think that's just like, I guess, the more modern adaptation of the mom working on a job that she feels like she's succeeding in, and the mother constantly still being under the sort of thumb of the husband, not really having a larger role to fulfill, was pretty depressing. Obviously, not like super out there and unrealistic for that time, but it still made the movie way less fun when that is about body swapping. Like, why not break that sort of reality and make it something that is less about that, if that makes sense. But maybe that is tone deaf. I don't know. It's also funny that they like open the movie and it's like, oh, it's Friday the 13th, and Jodie Comer's like, oh shit. She didn't just shit, but she's like turning it off. I was like, yeah. There's one thing that's also in the children book novel. I don't know if it's illustrated or not. But about her having her braces, the braces coming out, and I think they make a point about summarizing that it's supposed to be like something that the daughter would have forgot. That's also in the movie, and so the mother in her body ends up going to the dentist, the appointment, and gets the braces out, and it makes her more beautiful, and she would have forgotten to do that. And I think like one of the things that like she has the hots for the neighbor boy, but he sees her as like isn't she a bad seed? Like it makes me just cringe for thinking about it. Like that sort of terminology to say someone's a bad seed is just it's bad. But again, I know that was like the way that it's just a figure of speech. But yeah, that didn't like that, and then the way she was like trying to like sell herself as a daughter, like this. Yeah, again, it gets confusing with Freaky Friday talking about this, but you probably get what I mean. It's always like this switched. Someone is in someone else's body. But then, like, trying to convince this guy to like her was pretty uncomfortable because essentially I think the conversation ended when he was saying like, oh no, she's still got the braces. I don't like the braces. And she thinks about getting the braces out, as if that would resolve the issues there, when that guy just was kind of an asshole and kind of pretty incapable and just an idiot. Honestly, don't see what she saw in that guy, because he also can't watch a kid and a turkey in the oven. That whole thing, like, I think all of the bits where the kid has to deal with the mom stuff until it gets to that crazy police car chase is flawed. Is very flawed. There's not much to it. I think it's pretty boring. Then the police car chase gets really over the top, where it's like they go through a smaller hole with a smaller car, but the police car doesn't fit, so it like comes out in a triangle at the top. There's one bit where it like splits off and it just like cuts through the car. It becomes very cartoony. And then it's like she's both amazing at field hockey, but also really good at like water skiing. So obviously the dad forces her to go onto the water skis, and then they swap bodies, not just minds, but they, I guess at that point, don't switch their consciousness but their bodies, just so the mom is out there and they can add in the like, I don't know, that's the finale of the movie, which is pretty silly that like it ends up obviously having that teleportation, and it's initially queued up that transfer with them saying I want to switch lives or something like that at the same time. And then at the end it's the same gag as in the original one, where like the smaller brother and the dad, the fiance, are doing it. But I guess in the original one they're already married, and in the 2003 one it's about like her getting to be married again. And I think that like sort of character of someone who's a single mom trying to get married again, having her own career, just makes for a more compelling character, that there's more to her to be uncovered and discovered, where in this it is her in school saying, oh, young fella, young lady, you can't talk like that. There's like a lot of just different sort of old speak, old person speak that is interacting with teens, and it feels like it's at the expense of each of the other group. It's not in bad faith, but it just is quite outdated. I also think the bit with like the typewriter class that they have, and it's like all electronic, is a bit of a joke on like these being incapable of like adapting to something new, because like stuff's changing so fast, and the bit is just not really funny. And then it like, she puts another outlet thing, power into the power outlet, and then it like is too much and everyone's machines break down. I was like, okay, that was not her fault at all. That was pretty stupid, and I just found it kind of funny. I think just how crazy it gets in the police car chase, I can't say that I wasn't entertained. It was pretty crazy. But I just kept thinking, oh yeah, this person sucks, this person sucks, this person sucks. And the scenes where there's like rear projection or green screen have been around since like the 30s or I think late 30s. not used as much, but you can technically use that sort of technology for, like a long time ago differently on film. But I don't know what it was. It looked like rear projection when they're on the water skis, and it's actually Jodie Foster on it, and it looks like the cuts between like someone in a wig being a stunt performer doing it, and then back to her. Oh god, they're so jarring. It's really bad. It's nothing short of like horrible, and the same goes for like the car stuff, if I'm not mistaken. It just looks all very bad. The field hockey game where they just like hit her constantly, and I think that both coaches are like supposed to call fouls, which is really it's weird. I guess they don't have like a referee for that. But I was like, oh no, that was definitely one too many when they like just keep hitting her over and over again. I don't know. That's not really, I think, how field hockey works, but I'll stand corrected. I've never played it, but it just seemed a bit wrong. And sort of the mom's lack of understanding that she's like the star player of this field hockey team screamed to me like, aren't you you don't have a day job, you are a housewife who's very busy with keeping the house tidy, but then never going to your daughter's games, so she wouldn't even have an understanding of that she's good at the game and she's like the best. That just didn't make sense to me. Made me like the mom character even less. And it's just overall like very sexist. Like that character also, when she's in Jodie Foster's body, goes to see her husband, or in this case her dad, and there's a secretary who's in a dress, and then she just basically guilts her into like covering up because she feels like she's threatened by that, and it's just like read to me as so backwards sexist, and it's just, I don't know, it was pretty disgusting thing. I think that was probably the worst thing. Like I think one of the boy also says at one point like, oh, isn't it this sissy thing to cook, when he asks when the mom asks like the neighbor to help with that. Again, filled with like really cringy moments. I think the music sounds incredibly like royalty free. But the highlight is the police car chase. I think with this show, I do want to, instead of just like, talking about my thoughts, which any fucking idiot could do, again, still an idiot, even if I read a bit, I wanted to have a bit more of a look into how these movies were received, or maybe where the ideas stem from. Just something to give me another like reason to read a bit more, to do a bit more research, because that's a muscle that like I rarely get to stretch with how much I just like end up consuming new movies and series on a daily basis. So kind of having a reason to look up stuff is always neat. So I ended up reading a whole bunch about like this sort of idea originating from John Locke in the 1880s to 90s, from an essay concerning human understanding is what it's called. And it's basically arguing that every idea is derived from experience, from sensation or reflection, that it's something of like a rational being that is connected backwards to any past action or thought. It's a continuance of being. That's essentially there to define what it is to be a person. So all of that mumbo jumbo is to say that a person goes where the consciousness goes. So there was an argument about like Socrates not being Socrates in his sleep. So because he's not conscious, it's not his own actions as a person. So you couldn't trial him for something he did in his dreams. Whereas I guess also the idea comes from that you can transfer the being of a person into someone else's body if you take the consciousness by itself, because that is the culmination of all of that human experience that they've had, that is not tied to, I guess it is tied to your body, because that's always where it stays, because there's no way of like extracting it. But I found that like an initial interesting like thing to point to draw it back to. But then also, like, the sort of a philosophical idea of the ship of Theseus that you can take apart, but how long does it still stay the same ship if you replace every single part with a newer one? Or is this continuance of the ship then not made of its individual parts, but as it's like whole thing that stays together? And the ship of Theseus is also, it's obviously like very something that probably everyone listening is familiar with, that like you could take the whole thing apart and then rebuild it with different parts. Would that be, when you like completely have broken it down, then be a different ship? or not. And I think it's a really interesting idea that is not really, touched on by, at least from what I've read with John Locke. But it's more about the idea of this sort of experience that is tied to a body that, even though your consciousness is transferred, like how much of that was you being in someone else's body versus the experience that someone else had interacting with you while you were in the other person's body is obviously tied to their body and not to the consciousness when they flipped it, right? You can't really explain that to everyone. They would just think you're insane. So I think in this, I don't know what that like adds up to. It's just like a thought that I had and I don't have an answer to it. What that means, obviously, it's not something the most realistic thing that maybe at one point is coming to term is not that you switch bodies and consciousness with someone, but maybe that some form of your consciousness could be condensed down to a digital form or like some other form that you could transfer back into, the cloning thing. Essentially, I think to me makes sense with the argument of John Locke that like cloning someone, just having the same genetics and bringing them back up would not add their consciousness to it, so that wouldn't be the same person, which is not something that obviously Freakier Friday is about, but again, not a thought that I had. And maybe some other body swap movies. I'll give you my rating, by the way, for the 1976 version. I gave that a 5 out of 10 as well. But I had a look through some of the like body swap movies of recent year and tried to look back like even further, and there's a bunch that I don't really like, that aren't that great. I think there's more like time loop movies that are kind of semi-decent than there are like body swap movies or stories. And maybe it's just because, I don't know, the time loop thing in itself is through the repetition, it is way more about your action and your character, and body swapping is just like being in someone else's shoes, and that you can just like, escalate into fun scenarios. All of the movies are like from the last like 20 years. Like one of them is literally from last year with The Substance, right? That is a body swap movie essentially. Although one of them is conscious and the other one's not, until, well, I won't tell you. You just gotta stomach through The Substance. Last year as well, It's What's Inside. It ended up releasing on Netflix after it was, I think, at Sundance or at South by Southwest. I really enjoyed that. Definitely involves like a bunch of people body swapping. I think that's honestly, like, from the premise of body swap, it's probably like the best execution on it. There's also Your Name. I don't know if that's a spoiler to say that there's body swap. No, it's definitely in the trailer as well, but that's like consistently named as one of the best anime movies, and I would sign that. It's pretty decent. Will definitely get you, if you're an emotional person watching movies, it will get you to cry. It did for me. I think that one's quite beautiful. But yeah, that brings us to the end of episode 2 of the show. I hope I did a bit better than I did with my first one. I noticed when listening back that I was speaking very frantically, I don't even know, but just fast in the first episode, and I was kind of jumping from thought to thought, and I didn't have that many notes. I was just kind of speaking off the cuff, and I think I, like, multiple times while I was having a thought and verbalizing it, I felt like, oh no, I gotta move on to the next thing. I can't stay with this. Like, this is boring. I gotta move fast. It's just me. I gotta fill all of the time. But I can take the moments. It doesn't have to be rushed, and I just have to get comfortable with that. I'm really not used to doing this by myself. I did some podcast recording for like over 2 hours today where we did reviews and all of that, but there was someone else alongside me. It was a conversation, and speaking out into the void, especially not with the camera on, you oh my god, the way that I like move around with my hands, you would make fun of me if this was on camera. So it stays an audio only podcast for now at least. But I hope like what I say is it's somewhat entertaining. It's adding something to what you've watched, and maybe adding some thoughts to it. Hearing mine, I definitely love to hear yours. I think on Spotify you can even leave comments. But yeah, I'm trying to, like, I guess, get better at something that I'm not used to, which is with minimal notes, have sort of a free flow of speech to talk about something. I either work with podcasting, which is like, the typical one where there is more than one person, or I'm reading off a script, which is something that I'm still learning as well. But getting to do this is just very fun for me, and I hope you had a good time with it as well. I think I'll always say just go watch more movies, and I'll see you soon. But actually, I do have something else to say before you click out. You probably already are heading out. Oh my god, can I stretch this while I try to open it in another tab? again, I could just stop talking. But next week, we are gonna talk about Nobody 2. That's our movie of the week. Our film will be A Bittersweet Life, and our motion picture will be Samurai Rebellion. So I'm giving it away a bit. I've also already seen Nobody 2, but they're still on embargo, so I can't really tell you what I thought of it. But it's certainly worth watching. Maybe not for its quality, I don't know, I can't tell you, but definitely for the show, because I'll be getting into that next week. But thanks again for listening, and I will see you next week, hopefully. And yeah, go watch these movies and follow me on my socials, and I'll see you soon. So many outro phrases, but catch you on the flip side. How about that? Freaky Friday!